If I'm not mistaken, wouldn't you not agree that 2021 was arguably the year where we saw many of these cryptocurrencies gain institutional recognition and perhaps a stamp of approval? What does 2022 produce as a headline?
Well, absolutely, Rishaad. I think every year things are moving forward in the crypto space, and 2021 was absolutely a record year from various across the spectrum, from El Salvador recognizing Bitcoin as legal tender to all the developments we saw in the field of decentralized finance to even the metaverse. And really, there's a lot of optimism as we head into 2022, not only because of the entry of institutional players and the crypto industry becoming more institutionalized, but because also a lot of other momentum going on in various other verticals, which is, from other layer one tokens and ecosystems are growing to even areas like decentralized finance and non-fungible tokens, even the whole area with the metaverse and Web 3.0. So a lot of enthusiasm as we kick off the year in the crypto space.
But surely there's some headwinds, of course, here as well, aren't we? We're talking about perhaps higher interest rates. We're also talking about perhaps the rise of digital government currencies there as well. How does that affect the crypto world?
Absolutely, Rishaad. I think especially over the last couple of weeks, we saw a pullback in crypto markets. And many may say actually it was the expectation of some of the CPI numbers we saw this morning of the inflation figures coming up. But the reality is actually a lot of the market is quite optimistic on the prospect of crypto. Again, not only the institutionalization industry, the entry of institutional players, but also things like regulatory clarity that we're having more and more, and the ease for retail investors to buy into crypto, which was not the case a couple of years ago. You mentioned the rise of central bank issued digital currencies. Absolutely, 2021 was a big year for that. 2022 will be a year where all eyes will also be on central bank digital currencies, in particular on China. China in 2021, there was over $9.7 billion in ECNY that was transacted. There are, according to the latest official figures, 140 million wallets that are opened. A couple of days ago, it was reported that the ECNY app was the most downloaded app in China, and especially all eyes will be on China in 2022 with the expectation that the digital currency will be rolled out, which is obviously a big step, not only in financial markets, but also in the history of money more broadly as well.
As you said, Henri, a lot of the governments are looking at their own CBDCs. How closely are they watching China's e-yuan here? I mean, how significant is it? What are they looking out for in particular?
Absolutely, Haslinda. I mean, according to the latest official data that we have from the BIS, 86% of central banks are looking at the topic of CBDC. And this was data from a couple of months ago. The numbers are clearly higher right now. While the rollout, and everybody acknowledges that what's happening in China is very unique due to some of the macro environment there, there's a number of elements that is being watched very closely. Even today, for example, in the US, some politicians try to put a bill to actually make sure that the US Fed does not launch a retail CBDC, for example. There's a couple items that'll be watched very closely. One of them will be adoption. Second will be seen how it will be used on a day-to-day basis. And third, there'll be obviously a focus on some items like privacy, for example, which obviously there'll be a lot of attention, not only from crypto folks around the world, but also from policymakers, central bankers, and others as well.
We talk about cryptos, we talk about metaverse. How about MFTs? Will the euphoria fade or not? I mean, we saw volume surge, something like what, $12 billion last year.
Yeah, absolutely. NFTs were definitely had their coming out party in 2021 in a big way. And the volumes have been absolutely tremendous. Even the NFTs closed the year with over $20 billion in volumes, which is obviously quite meaningful. And there was obviously a lot of the high profile events that took place, from Beeple to selling its painting for a record $69 million to actually the rise of CryptoPunks and others. I think what's going to be interesting to watch is not on the NFT side, but some of the boring sides of NFTs. For example, tax or regulatory considerations. Is the issuance of an NFT, how should that be seen from a tax perspective? From an accounting perspective, should we see NFTs as an intangible asset, as an IP right? Even from a regulatory perspective, should we look at NFTs, for example, what about the consumer protection rights and even IP issues around? I mean, to put things in perspective, Haslinda, according to the latest PwC crypto tax report that just came out, only 7% of tax authorities around the world have provided some kind of guidance on NFTs. So for NFTs really to become more mainstream, we need some clarity on some of these more boring topics like the tax and accounting and regulatory as well.
You bring up an excellent point, actually, Henri, with regard to that, and it also leads us to another point. It reminds us about 20 years ago when we saw what happened with the birth of the digital economy, how that played out in these regulatory issues too. Tell me, how does the metaverse, talking about all these things, I guess, locking them all into one, how does this change the way that corporates in particular deal with with their own businesses and their interface with the outside world?
Absolutely, Rishaad, you're spot on. I mean, 20 years ago, every business had to suddenly come up with their e-commerce and online strategy. And we'll see the same thing over the next couple of months on the metaverse and broader Web 3.0 strategy. For example, there's been all these metaverse ecosystems for some time, from Roblox to, Second Life that have been around for some time. But really what we saw in the last couple of months, with a lot of focus on ecosystems like, Decentraland, Sandbox, and others, has really brought the attention there. One thing I think we'll see over the next couple of months is really Fortune 500 companies, not only financial services, but across other industries as well, try to come up with their metaverse strategy and see how they're going to play in these various ecosystems that are taking place. The metaverse, whether we like it or not, is here to stay. Yes, they may change. It may be different reiterations. It's still very clunky, but I think many acknowledge that this kind of metaverse communities, especially in a Web 3.0, decentralized ecosystems, are probably on their way. So a lot of companies would look at their strategy on that perspective.